On a quiet morning, when the golden sun had just broken through the mist over Thomas's farmland, he stumbled upon something that seemed almost otherworldly. Hidden deep in the soft earth near the chicken house were a cluster of eggs unlike any he had ever seen before. They weren't brown, white, or even speckled like ordinary eggs. These were pitch black, shimmering faintly under the morning light, as though the night sky itself had been sealed inside them. Thomas froze, his breath catching in awe. Could these mysterious black eggs be real? Or was this some kind of sign from above? The air felt charged with mystery. A miracle had quietly arrived on his land. One that would change not only his farm, but his entire destiny. Farmer Thomas stood still in the cool Georgia morning. His boots sunk halfway in the damp soil, as his eyes fixed upon something so strange, so unreal, that even the wide valley winds seemed to pause their whistle. Before him lay a cluster of eggs, but not ordinary ones. These weren't the warm brown or soft white eggs he had gathered since childhood. No, these were black, midnight black, shining as though carved from obsidian, reflecting the sunrise in hues of silver and fire. For 10 long minutes he did not move, his heart thundering in disbelief. His farm had been dying, his family's legacy crumbling under debt and despair. Yet, here, hidden beneath long grass in the valley of his forefathers, lay a mystery that felt like a whisper from heaven itself. Was this a curse, or could it be salvation? The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, the world, and they that dwell therein. He muttered those words, trembling, before stooping to touch the eggs, feeling a strange warmth pulsing through their shells. In that moment, Farmer Thomas was not just a man on broken land. He was a witness to the edge of a miracle. And when he carried those black eggs to his truck, whispering a guilty prayer of apology to the unseen mother who had laid them, he did not know he was carrying the beginning of a story that would shake both his life and the world watching beyond his farm. This was no ordinary discovery. This was the birth of an animal miracle, the kind of survival story destined to echo in every emotional true story, every touching animal story, every heartwarming animal video the world would call a viral YouTube story. And as the truck door slammed shut, sealing the eggs inside with him, Thomas felt the tears slip down his weathered face. For the first time in years, he wasn't just surviving. He was hoping. Nights turned into days, and the days stretched into long weeks as Thomas tended the mysterious black eggs inside his old hatching machine. His hands, rough with calluses from years of labor, adjusted the moisture, checked the temperature, whispered prayers like lullabies to the silent shells. Each morning, before feeding his chickens or collecting the dull brown and white eggs that no longer sold in town, he would press his ear against the black shells, waiting for the faintest crack, the gentlest peep. Nothing. The eggs lay still, mocking him, haunting him. And yet, his heart swelled with visions. He dreamed of crowds coming to his farm, wide-eyed children marveling at black-feathered chicks, reporters calling this the most dramatic wildlife rescue story of the decade. He imagined headlines: "Farmer discovers miracle eggs, world in tears." Still, doubt gnawed at his soul. What if these were not gifts but omens? What if they belonged not to chickens, but to creatures that crawled and hissed in the dark? The verse came to him again. "Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it?" Thomas clung to those words, daring to believe that even broken men on broken farms could witness miracles. And yet, the silence of the eggs weighed heavier each passing day. He began to feel as though God was testing him, asking if he had the faith to believe in what he could not yet see. Still, he waited, for when life hides behind silence, it is often preparing the loudest cry of all. But then, sickness came like a thief in the night. One cold dawn, Thomas awoke drenched in sweat, his body aching with fever, his head pounding like drums of war. He stumbled from bed, tried to feed his chickens, but collapsed against the barn door, his hands trembling too much to carry the pail. The farm began to decay in his absence. Weeds clawed through the soil, food bins ran empty, and his once lively chicken coops echoed with silence. The black eggs still sat in the hatcher, untouched, unmoving. His hope, once a fire, flickered dangerously low. Lying in bed, he stared at the cracked wooden ceiling, whispering, "Lord, do not forsake me. Do not forsake them." Each night, in fever dreams, he saw visions. The eggs breaking open, black wings unfolding, glowing eyes staring at him with a bond beyond human comprehension. He woke weeping, unsure if the visions were warnings or promises. "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." His tears dampened the pillow, not for himself, but for the lives he might lose, both his own and whatever miracle lay within those shells. This was no longer just about farming. This was about survival, about the eternal bond between humanity and animals, about whether hope could still live when despair had already claimed the land. And in that breaking point, Thomas felt his spirit sink to the lowest valley. Yet somewhere deep, a whisper said, "Not yet. The miracle has not yet come." And then, on a dawn that seemed no different from all the rest, the silence broke, a sound so faint it could have been mistaken for the whisper of the wind. Crack. Thomas, pale and weak, dragged himself to the hatching machine, his breath shallow. He pressed his face against the glass, and there it was, a fracture in the smooth black surface, a sliver of life breaking through darkness. His body trembled as he sank to his knees, tears streaming down his face. One egg, then another, then another. Tiny beaks chipped through. Tiny cries filled the air, not of horror, but of life. Out poured creatures unlike any Thomas had ever seen. Not monsters, but miracles. Their feathers shimmered like polished onyx. Their eyes glowed with a gentleness that pierced his weary soul. And when one of the newborn chicks stumbled toward him, pressing its tiny body against his palm, Thomas broke down completely, sobbing not from sorrow, but from a joy too great to hold. For every creature of God is good, and nothing to be refused, if it be received with thanksgiving. He knew in that moment his life and his farm had been saved, not by money, not by men, but by the bond between humanity and animals. What had begun as despair had turned into the greatest touching animal story, a heartwarming animal video waiting to touch millions, a viral YouTube story that would remind the world of the miracle that still lives in the wild. The black chicks chirped louder, filling the farmhouse with a chorus of survival, and Thomas, laughing through tears, whispered, "Welcome home, my miracles." The chickens clucked weakly in their coops, their feed bins nearly empty, their water bowls dry. Thomas's absence weighed heavily upon every corner of the farm. What had once been a place of steady rhythm and gentle life was slipping into neglect. The brown and white eggs dwindled day by day. Baskets once full now barely covered the bottom. Neighbors began to notice. The community that had always admired Thomas's farm whispered among themselves at the local store and at the church pews. Something wasn't right. Mark, Thomas's lifelong friend and neighbor, could no longer ignore the unease gnawing at him. He walked down the dirt road one dusky evening, the crickets humming all around. And when he reached the farmhouse, his heart sank. Weeds had overtaken the edges of the barn. The animals looked thinner, and silence replaced the once lively chorus of farm sounds. He knocked, and after a long pause, Thomas opened the door, pale, trembling, and too weak to even stand upright. In that moment, Mark understood. His friend was on the edge of collapse. Without hesitation, he put a steadying hand on Thomas's shoulder and said with firm compassion, "Don't worry about anything. I'll take care of the farm. You rest. You get your strength back." And as the words fell into the dim farmhouse air, Thomas felt a weight lift from his weary heart. For it is written, "Two are better than one, because they have a good reward for their labor. For if they fall, one will lift up his fellow." That night, the quiet farm carried not only the sound of crickets, but the echo of brotherhood, the human and animal connection standing stronger together than apart. Mark worked like a man possessed. Before the sun broke over the Georgia hills, he was feeding the chickens, scrubbing the coops, hauling water until sweat poured down his back. By midday, he rallied neighbors who remembered the better days of Thomas's land, each lending a hand, men, women, even children, all determined not to let the farm crumble. Together, they restored what sickness had threatened to steal. Yet, in all their kindness, none of them knew about the secret Thomas had been too weak to mention. The mysterious black eggs resting silently in the hatching machine. Those eggs lay hidden, a secret waiting to explode into wonder or terror. One evening, after finishing a long day's chores, Mark lingered in the barn, his flashlight sweeping over straw and wood. Then it came. Faint, almost fragile, but unmistakable. Peep, peep, peep. His heart thudded. He followed the sound, his beam darting across nests until it fell upon the hatching machine. There it was. A tremor. A shift. A tiny crack zigzagging across a black shell. His breath caught in his throat. He pressed closer, light trembling in his hand, eyes wide with disbelief. These weren't normal eggs. What had Thomas found? Mark ran through the night air, bursting through the farmhouse door. "Thomas," he cried, "you won't believe this. Those weird black eggs are hatching." Thomas, still weak in bed, raised his head, and though his body trembled, his eyes suddenly glowed with the light of hope. "Maybe," he whispered, his voice cracking, "maybe this is the miracle I've been praying for." And in that fragile moment, when two friends shared a secret too strange for words, it felt as if the farm itself held its breath. For with God, nothing shall be impossible. 2 days later, Thomas could finally stand again, leaning on Mark's arm as they made their way to the hatching machine. They knelt side by side, their faces inches away, eyes locked on the trembling shells. The silence broke. A sharp crack, a struggle, and then life. A chick pushed its way out, feathers slick at first, then drying into shimmering black that sparkled beneath the dim light of the barn. Its tiny eyes blinked open, reflecting curiosity and determination. It chirped, not weakly, but with a victorious cry that made both men exhale in wonder. Then another shell split, then another. One by one, the eggs revealed creatures of mesmerizing beauty, their feathers sleek and black as midnight, their beaks and eyes gleaming like polished obsidian. The barn was alive with sound, tiny chirps and rustles, a chorus of new beginnings. Both men gasped, overcome by the sight. It wasn't just hatching they were witnessing. It was survival itself, raw and radiant. "Thomas," Mark breathed, fumbling for his phone, his fingers shaking. He searched frantically, and then his voice cracked with excitement. "I think these are Ayam Cemani chicks." Thomas blinked, confusion on his face. Mark laughed, tears glistening in his eyes. "They're from Indonesia, one of the rarest breeds on earth. Black feathers, black beaks, black right down to their bones. People pay fortunes for them, and now they're here, on your farm." Thomas staggered back, his hand over his mouth, tears streaming openly. Years of toil, failure, and near collapse poured out of him in sobs that shook his chest. "All this time," he choked, "all this time I thought God had forgotten me." Mark gripped his shoulder, his own tears falling. "No, Thomas. This is your miracle." And in that sacred moment, the barn wasn't just a barn. It was a chapel. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. The news spread like wildfire. Neighbors who had only weeks ago whispered about the decline of Thomas's land now flocked to see the impossible. Chicks so rare, so mesmerizing, that even hardened farmers gasped in awe. Children pressed against the coop's edges, their eyes wide as the Ayam Cemani chicks pecked at straw, their feathers glistening under the light. Whispers turned to cheers, pessimism turned to hope. What was once the story of a failing farm had become the viral YouTube story of a lifetime. A touching animal story, a heartwarming animal video that carried not just fascination, but redemption. Thomas moved carefully among the chicks, building them a special home with soft bedding and glowing heat lamps. He wrote notes about their growth, watching how each one carried a personality of curiosity, playfulness, or quiet strength. Their feathers shimmered under the sun, their tiny claws scratched with life's determination. And everywhere Thomas looked, he saw himself reflected in their survival. These weren't just birds, they were symbols. They were proof that even when the world forgets you, even when sickness steals your strength and failure weighs heavy, life can still break through the shell of despair. The righteous shall flourish like the palm tree. He shall grow like a cedar in Lebanon. Standing in the barn, watching the rarest of creatures breathe and move on his once dying farm, Thomas realized this wasn't just the saving of his land. This was the saving of his spirit. The miracle had come, and it was alive. It wasn't long before Thomas began to notice something extraordinary about his flock of Ayam Cemani chicks. At first, he thought it was simply their rare beauty. The way their feathers, black as midnight, shimmered like velvet under the dim glow of the barn lamps. But as days turned into weeks, he realized these birds carried more than rarity. They carried resilience, unlike ordinary chickens that struggled when nights grew colder or food ran thin. These chicks thrived. Their bodies grew faster, stronger, and healthier than he had dared to expect. Their black feathers weren't simply black. No. When the sunlight touched them just right, they shimmered with hidden colors. A rainbow-like gleam of green and purple that made them appear otherworldly. It was as if God himself had brushed their wings with fragments of the aurora. Thomas, ever observant, began recording his notes each day in a weathered notebook. Scribbles of their weight, growth, and behavior filling the pages. The more he studied them, the more he felt he was witnessing a miracle unfolding feather by feather. And with each passing sunrise, he understood that these weren't just rare birds. They were living symbols of survival. They were his second chance, proof that broken things can still shine brighter than ever. They that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. Isaiah 40:31. As he watched the shimmering chicks scratch the straw, Thomas whispered a prayer of thanks. His farm wasn't dying anymore. It was being reborn. Word spread like wildfire, traveling beyond the quiet valley, past the fields of Georgia, into whispers that reached strangers from faraway towns. One warm afternoon, a black car rolled slowly up the dusty driveway of Thomas's farm. Out stepped a tall, polished man who introduced himself as Mr. Thompson. A wealthy investor known across states for his passion for exotic creatures. He had heard rumors of Thomas's mysterious birds and had come to see them with his own eyes. When he entered the barn and stood before the flock, even his well-trained composure broke. His jaw slackened, his eyes widened. "Extraordinary," he breathed, staring at the Ayam Cemani with reverence. "I've never seen anything quite like them." He watched the way their rainbow-glossed feathers shifted with every movement, their strength evident in their sharp steps and alert stares. Thomas's chest swelled with pride as he explained how he had nurtured them day and night, even when sickness nearly claimed him. Mr. Thompson listened, nodding thoughtfully, before turning with an intensity that made Thomas's pulse quicken. "These birds," he said firmly, "are not only rare. They are a revolution. I believe they can change your life." He laid out an offer, an investment, a partnership. He would pour money into Thomas's farm, providing stability, growth, and security, in exchange for a share of future profits. For the first time in years, Thomas felt the weight of failure lift fully off his shoulders. He extended his calloused hand, his eyes brimming with relief, and said, "You've got yourself a deal, Mr. Thompson." And as their handshake sealed the future, Thomas knew he wasn't just signing a contract. He was stepping into destiny. Commit your work to the Lord, and your plans will be established. Yet fate still had one more secret hidden within the flock. One golden afternoon, while feeding the birds, Thomas noticed a chick unlike the rest. It was slightly bigger, its feathers not only shining black, but glimmering with an even more pronounced rainbow sheen, like oil on water, glowing with emerald and violet. Its eyes, unlike the others, sparkled with an uncanny shade of deep blue, the color of the ocean. His heart skipped. Kneeling closer, he gently scooped it into his hands, studying the miracle before him. This was no ordinary chick, not even by Ayam Cemani standards. Something deeper, rarer, pulsed within its tiny body. Without hesitation, Thomas called upon a poultry geneticist from the university, who arrived days later with tools and tests. What they discovered left them both speechless. This chick carried a rare genetic mutation that amplified its already remarkable traits. Stronger, faster growing, more radiant than any of its siblings. It was, In the scientist's words, a flawless gem of its breed. The news spread instantly. Collectors, breeders, and animal enthusiasts flooded Thomas with offers. Phones rang, emails poured in, and wealthy buyers promised sums that once seemed unimaginable. This single chick wasn't just rare, it was legendary. And in its small, determined heartbeat, Thomas heard the echo of his own struggle, his own survival. Behold, I make all things new. The farm, once forgotten and failing, was now alive with purpose and prosperity. Each day, Thomas stood in the chicken house, his boots sinking softly into the straw, watching his radiant flock peck and chirp in harmony. Children laughed when they visited. Neighbors smiled with pride, and journalists photographed the shimmering feathers that caught the sun like jewels. The farm was no longer just land. It was a beacon, a story of resilience, of mystery turned into miracle, of despair turned into joy. Thomas breathed deeply as he watched them, his heart swelling with peace he hadn't felt in years. Against all odds, he had not only saved his farm, but transformed it into a symbol of hope. His story became one of the most touching animal stories, a heartwarming animal video, a viral YouTube story that reminded the world, when humanity cares for the mysteries of nature, nature answers with miracles. Standing tall in his barn, surrounded by the chorus of life, Thomas whispered, "Thank you, Lord." And in the glittering feathers of his flock, the answer shimmered back, "Hope reborn." Did you enjoy this story? If you found strange black eggs on your land, would you take them in or leave them behind? Let us know in the comments below. If you were touched by this miracle of animal rescue and human connection, please like this video and subscribe for more. Sometimes the wild gives us not just creatures, but second chances. Thank you for watching, and remember, every ending can still be a new beginning. Thomas stood inside the chicken house, watching the shimmering feathers of his extraordinary flock glisten in the fading sunlight. He felt tears well in his eyes. These birds weren't just chickens anymore. They were a living miracle, proof that hope can be reborn from the most mysterious beginnings. Every peck, every flutter of their wings reminded him of the day he had first discovered those strange black eggs, the moment that changed everything. He realized that the real treasure wasn't just the wealth or recognition that came with the Ayam Cemani. It was the journey, the faith to believe in the unknown, and the courage to nurture what others might have ignored. These birds had given him more than success. They had given him a second chance at life. Thomas whispered softly to himself, "Sometimes miracles come in the smallest, quietest forms. We just have to be willing to see them." And as the evening breeze carried the soft rustle of wings across the farm, Thomas smiled with peace in his heart. Against all odds, he hadn't just saved his farm. He had become a guardian of a miracle. One did descent.